Hi, this is Larry Levin, and welcome to another edition of Hey Hey 5 and 5. And our esteemed guest today is one Cary Mogerman, who I've known for quite some time, who is also president of the St. Louis Federation of Reformed Temples, or FORT. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
So, first of all, in the broadest sense, for those who aren't aware, tell us a little
Sure.
bit about FORT and what it is and what it does.
Sure. Well, FORT is the Federation of Reformed Temples. It was when we had the Midwest Council for the Union for Reformed Judaism, officed in St. Louis for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And FORT was a product of that office. It was supported by that office, and the executive director of the Midwest Council was always an officer of FORT. Mm-hmm. So the records I have go back to 1976. Wow. So the organization may predate 1976, but it's all of the Reformed congregations in St. Louis that belong to the URJ are constituents of FORT.
So without that Midwest Council here now, right, how has that affected what FORT does, either for better or worse?
Well, it has changed it. We don't have the guidance of the executive director. Rabbi Lane Steiner was our executive director for many years. Well, I've been involved, and so we don't have that, and we don't have the clerical support of the office. But we continue to meet, and we discuss issues of common interest to the congregations and the Reformed community.
So let's talk about some of those issues, because almost every week now, it seems that we're reading in some Jewish publication or another, including this one, about so-called strategic alliances and collaborations and mergers of Jewish organizations and synagogues. And this obviously poses great challenges. So what have you found are some of the hardest issues to talk about in those discussions?
I think the hardest thing is the melding of the different cultures of each of our congregations. And so we all worship and have community under different tents, even in the city and county of St. Louis, and we do for a reason. The congregations I know that have been involved in merger discussions or collaborative discussions find that it's very difficult to think about merging the two cultures. And if you start to make a list of all the things you have to decide and work on, you have facilities issues, personnel issues, commemorative issues, you name it. We have focused as a group, FORT, on collaboration now.
Do you think the Reformed community as a whole, and I know it may be hard to generalize, but do you think the community as a whole is realistic about what's happening in terms of available resources to support synagogues and other institutions in the Jewish community?
Generally, yes, but it requires information, and it requires the ability to communicate the information, and it requires an interest on the part of the recipient. Yeah. You know, we all hear about, you know, I don't read the Temple Bulletin, or I never read the Jewish Light. It comes every week. And so you have that issue. But I think when people are informed, they are interested in how we respond to it. And I think you're right. It's not just the temples and the synagogues, but all the community resources we have as a Jewish community I think are probably facing unprecedented pressures, at least in the last 50 years. And maybe before that there were similar periods of time and scarcity of resources. But certainly in the time that I've been active, I think this is the most challenging time.
And these were issues, of course, that were percolating well before this current 3 or 4 year recessionary period. Do you think this recessionary period has been a bit of a face slapping to people to get a little more serious?
I think it certainly has, no question about it. But you're right, we're dealing with some demographic trends across the country that are really, they have to be addressed. In the affiliated community, we have people joining congregations later than they did 50 years ago. They have children in the religious school later than they did 50 years ago. They, because of the mobility that we have now, unprecedented mobility in the United States, when they retire, they move to where their grandchildren are now, more than they ever did before.
Right.
And so we lose affiliations on the front end and on the back end of the lifetime of affiliation that maybe we had more of 40 or 50 years ago.
Well, that's about all we have time for today on our 5 and 5 Hey Hey, and I want to thank Cary Mogerman once again for joining us,
Thank you very much for asking me, Larry.
and we will see you again next time. Take care.